Here's a quick review of the WTB Silverado saddle. I have a ton of bikes, but not all of them run a Silverado, and I do really like this saddle, so I want to do a quick review on it. Saddles on mountain bikes are not something you want to be thinking about. You just want your saddle to work for you. When you're descending, you want it out of the way, you don't want anything sharp, you just want a simple saddle that doesn't bother you. When you're climbing, you're going to be seated up most of the time, and you want a saddle that's going to be comfortable and not bother you and cause you to get irritated or rub raw or anything like that. When you get to saddle fit and what works and what doesn't work, generally you've got to pay attention to your sit bone width. So that's the actual bone inside your butt that you're really sitting on when you're on a bike seat. Everyone has a different sit bone width. One really important thing that a lot of people forget about is that the measurement of these bones, it's dynamic, it changes. As your hands get lower, your pelvis tends to rotate forwards, and that changes the position where your sit bones actually weight the saddle. So on bikes like this here that have a really low handlebar, maybe even with the saddle and a little bit below, all the way down to drop bar bikes, road bikes, gravel bikes, cyclocross bikes, anything where your hands are pretty far low, something that's on the narrower side of the spectrum is almost always a lot more comfortable than a wider saddle. So the Silverado is a fairly narrow, yet still quite long, very flat saddle. It's 133 millimeter width, and that works really well when your sit bones are quite narrow. Now, beyond the width, the saddle itself is a very flat shape to it, which is really good when your hands are that far low and you need to scoot up forwards on the saddle for a climb. Even when you're pedaling on like a medium climb, you'll still find yourself moving around quite a bit on the saddle. That helps you lay down the most amount of power, maintain traction. It's how you ride a mountain bike off-road. You're not just seated in one stationary, stagnant position when you're climbing and pedaling on a bike like this. You can keep pedaling even though the hill is really steep. And sometimes you even sit not quite all the way back, but somewhere in the middle, off to a side. You're often moving around and sitting in a different spot. In a saddle like this that's flat, but with enough support, it doesn't poke you in a weird way if you're not sitting in that one sweet spot. The Silverado has a really cool feature that not many folks talk about, and that's its super low stack height. So when you're trying to fit a dropper post on your mountain bike, chances are you will much prefer the longer drop on your mountain bike, but you have to fit that on there for when you're climbing. And a low profile saddle means you've got the most amount of real estate underneath it to fit the longest dropper possible. I think I measured that this is just under 40 millimeters in height. And keep in mind, this saddle is several years old, so it's probably sagged down a little bit over the years, but that's still much lower than any new saddle that I've found. If you have any questions about the Silverado, drop me a comment below. And if you're thinking about refreshing an older bike with a nice new saddle, definitely give the Silverado a try. It's available in 5 different levels, all the way from carbon down to a steel-railed, synthetic covered sport version. All of them are fairly comfortable. The carbon is going to be the stiffest and will offer the least amount of forgiveness when you're seated and hammering through the bumps. Some folks do like that, other folks don't. So it all depends on your personal preference, your bike setup. I like this team version here. It's my favorite. It provides tons of forgiveness. It's very lightweight. Titanium rails are plenty strong. The cover has held up great. I have a link below that goes straight to this model saddle here over at Jensen USA. And if you're thinking about a new saddle, I definitely recommend the Silverado. If you have a higher handlebar bike, there's a bunch of other great saddles you should look at as well, but a lower handlebar, more aggressive modern mountain bike, this is a great way to go. If you like this review video, click that subscribe button below.